Lewis and Clark expedition had its beginning in the mind of one man, Thomas Jefferson. He wanted to know if that fabled Northwest Passage, a water route across the continent, might be out there beyond the headwaters of the Missouri. In his Enlightenment way of thinking, he envisioned that in the natural order of things, the continent should be reasonably symmetrical, and if one could reach the headwaters of the Missouri, it should be only a short portage over the divide to the headwaters of the Columbia, and then you could float merrily on down to the ocean. And so it was some 200 years later, a group that would become known as the Discovery Expedition of St. Charles would have its beginning in the mind and dreams of one man, our mentor, our inspiration, Glenn Bishop. By 1999, the Discovery Expedition was making plans for our own journey across the country. It would be the greatest living history adventure ever attempted, covering more than 8,000 miles over a period of almost 4 years. It would involve some 300 DSEC members and more than 400 community events across the country. It would take incredible teamwork, and just like the original Corps of Discovery, a diverse group would need to lend their individual talents and expertise and all pull together to make it happen. But DSEC could not do it alone. A living history project of this magnitude would require the help of numerous partners along the trail if we were to have any chance at all for success. And we got that help. From the National Park Service, our #1 benefactor, the National Forest Service, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Bureau of Land Management, our brothers and sisters in the National Guard who became part of our Discovery family, state and local agencies, Indian and non-Indian communities across the country. By boat, by dugout canoe, on horseback, and afoot, we brought the story to life for hundreds of thousands of smiling faces from sea to shining sea. We built a legacy we are all proud to be a part of. A legacy of camaraderie and adventure, and most importantly, a legacy of sharing our adventure with communities large and small across the nation. As communities worked to make their bicentennial experience memorable, they became closer knit. And as the bicentennial moved across the country, we became a closer knit American family. That, my friends, is the very essence of our bicentennial legacy. Please join us now along the trail as we share that legacy.
The Discovery Expedition had its beginning in the mind of one man, Glenn Bishop. Glenn Bishop was a river rat, and I use that term river rat affectionately. We in the Discovery Expedition proudly count ourselves among the ranks of the river rats. Glenn lived in St. Charles, Missouri, Lewis and Clark town, and thought it would be a really neat thing to have a full-scale recreation of the Lewis and Clark keelboat on the Missouri in St. Charles. He started out by building a 55-inch long scale model. From there, he proceeded on and began construction of a 55-foot long wooden boat in his backyard in St. Charles, Missouri. I'm sure the neighbors were a little bit shocked, and some of them probably thought Noah had moved in, but Glenn continued on to bring his dream to reality and completed the construction of the keelboat in the backyard of his home in St. Charles. By 1992, the keelboat was far enough along that it could be loaded on a flatbed and hauled to Washington, D.C. to participate in the 500-year celebration commemorating Columbus discovering America. It was a real source of pride to see the keelboat and the group from St. Charles parading down Constitution Avenue, and of course, the keelboat won first prize for the best parade entry. In 1994, the keelboat was ready to be launched. It was christened by Joanne and safely moved out onto the Mississippi River for its maiden voyage. 1996 was a very exciting year for the newly formed Discovery Expedition. It was a very successful 7-week trip on the river. Ken Burns was in the process of filming for the PBS series on Lewis and Clark. The Discovery Expedition was asked to be part of the documentary. In January of 1997, disaster struck. The keelboat was stored in a warehouse in St. Louis so it could be worked on over the course of the winter, when a fire broke out and the keelboat burned to the ground. Literally standing in the ashes of the keelboat, Glenn was asked, "Now what? Where do we go from here?" Glenn leaned back and folded his arms and commented, "Well, you know, I was never completely satisfied with that boat anyway. I guess we will just have to build a better one." That same winter, work began on the two pirogues, the red and the white boat. The two pirogues were finished in time to be taken to Fort Massac for reenactment in October of 1998. Stephen Ambrose had recently published Undaunted Courage, and he not only became friends with Glenn Bishop, but he was so impressed and so taken with the St. Charles group that he became a charter member of the Discovery Expedition. When the opportunity presented itself to actually ride in one of the boats on the Missouri, he jumped at the chance to join his buddy Glenn for a cruise. Work continued on the second keelboat, and by the summer of 2001, the boat was ready for its first big river trip as a showcase for the Lewis and Clark Trail Heritage Foundation meeting in Pierre, South Dakota. The maiden voyage from Pierre down to Yankton was a smashing success, and plans continued in preparation for the Bicentennial. Sadly, in October of 2001, we lost Glenn. The guys in the Corps turned out full dress blues as Glenn took his last ride on his beloved boat as we conveyed his remains to the cemetery. For our members, our goal was to provide a rich and genuine living history experience, but equally as important, and perhaps more important, was to promote education and the study of our natural history and heritage. The Eastern Legacy began January 14th, 2003. The Discovery Expedition gathered for the first Bicentennial signature event in Charlottesville, Virginia. We were honored to be the living history group selected to assemble on the rooftop adjacent to Jefferson's home and fire the salute that officially began the Bicentennial. Our first Bicentennial Living History encampment was at Harper's Ferry in April, where we commemorated Meriwether Lewis's time there in 1803. In late August, the Corps gathered at Elizabeth, Pennsylvania in preparation for the start of our voyage. We set up an encampment on the banks of the Monongahela and had several days to provide for boat training for the men who had not yet qualified. On the morning of August 31st at 6 a.m., we gathered on the shoreline adjacent to the keelboat for a sunrise prayer service. Jim Rasher played a heart-wrenching version of Amazing Grace on his harmonica. The Corps then gathered in formal military fashion and raised the colors on the keelboat. This marked the beginning of a tradition that we would maintain to the Pacific Ocean and back, of honoring the colors morning and evening as we sang Chester. The following morning, we pushed off from Pittsburgh and began our trip down the Ohio. We had a warm reception at Rochester and Georgetown before pushing on to Fort Steuben. At Fort Steuben, we had our first formal educational experience entertaining a large group of school children in the parade grounds of the fort. From Fort Steuben, it was on downriver to Wellsburg, where we had a special ceremony and paid homage to Patrick Gass. On down the Ohio to Wheeling, where we picked up the red boat as the Corp of Discovery had done 200 years prior. We commemorated the arrival of a wagon load of supplies from Fort Pitt, loaded all the goods onto the keelboat in preparation for the continuation of our voyage. Comforting to know that our own seamen kept close watch as we passed through the locks and continued on downriver. Continuing on down the Ohio, we arrived at the falls and encamped just below the site of George Rogers Clark's cabin. This is a site where William Clark was living when he received Lewis's invitation to join him for the expedition. We were joined at the signature event by our own fife and drum corps from St. Charles. Our departure from the falls was a major part of the signature event. We were joined by our good friend Hal Stern and Hassan Davis in the role of York as we recognized the 9 young men from Kentucky. After the formal program, we marched down to the boats, and for the first time, Captains Lewis and Clark boarded the keelboat. A large crowd gathered as we were honored with a flyover and received a rousing send-off as we pushed away and proceeded on downriver. Our next major event was at Fort Massac. The state of Illinois had done a wonderful job maintaining historical accuracy in the recreation of the historic fort of the early 1800s. George Drouillard looked on as a military contingent from the fort welcomed the Corp of Discovery. It was at this site in 1803 that the captains recruited additional members for the Corp of Discovery. The men stand for inspection, hoping that they will be chosen for the Western adventure. On the porch of the fort, 3 generations of the Shannon family gathered for a photo. We left Fort Massac and proceeded on, covering the last stretch of the Ohio. A cold, wet, blustery day as we arrive at the confluence of the Ohio and the Mississippi. Near the site of old Fort Kaskaskia, we pick up the white boat as Lewis and Clark did 200 years earlier. For the first time, all 3 of the Lewis and Clark crafts are on the Mississippi, proceeding on toward Camp River du Bois. We encamped at St. Genevieve, hemmed in by river barges and forced up against a muddy bank of the Mississippi. Continuing on up the river, we reached the historic landmark, Tower Rock. The captains, young Shannon, and several of the men climbed to the top.
They lost their all in a northeast gale. Now round the way for Louisiana.
We secured the 3 boats, formed up, and all marched along the levee. Arriving at Camp River du Bois on the historic date, December 12th.
All the Kentucky don't have no sled. All the way, they slide down the hill on the catfish heads and round the way for Louisiana.
The Discovery Expedition maintained a presence at the fort over the course of the winter. Our own John Shields, Aubrey Williams, bears the elements as he forges tools and equipment. We had an opportunity to recreate the scene depicted in our good friend Michael Haynes' painting, Shooting for the Red Leggings. In March, members of the Corp of Discovery gathered in Wood River for the 3 Flags ceremony. The Corps took the white pirogue from the Illinois side, crossed over, and landed on the St. Louis levee just below the arch. May 14th, 2004. Rain the fore part of the day, as it had 200 years before. We loaded the 2 pirogues and the keelboat and prepared for our departure. Over the winter, a member of the Army Corps of Engineers helped the Discovery Expedition construct a tent assembly for the keelboat to facilitate protecting the men from the elements. Crossing over to the confluence of the Missouri, we proceeded on upriver. Our first stop was historic Fort Bellefontaine. From Fort Bellefontaine, we continued on upriver to our home port of St. Charles, Missouri. We landed in St. Charles to the cheers of thousands of onlookers. The men formed up and marched to our encampment adjacent to the boathouse. Over the next several days, we interacted with throngs of people as we participated in the combined St. Charles Heritage Days and Lewis and Clark signature event. The St. Charles event was an opportunity for Discovery Expedition members and their families to gather and enjoy camaraderie around the camp, and especially around the campfires in the evenings. The Missouri Conservation Department provided a very interesting exhibit demonstrating how dugout canoes were made. Little did we know that several of their members would soon join our group, and those same dugouts would push off from the shores of Fort Mandan and continue on up the Missouri. The Clark family had scheduled a special rededication of William Clark's memorial in Bellefontaine Cemetery. William Clark's great-great-great-great-grandson, Joseph Small, only recently returning from Iraq, carried our nation's colors. One of the keynote speakers at the ceremony was our good friend Rod Arrowite, a Lemhi Shoshone. Great-great-great-grandson John Clark shows a striking resemblance to his famous ancestor. Young Shannon, who often found himself lost, gets some guidance from the youngest red-haired chief, young William Clark, the great-great-great-great-grandson of William Clark. On May 21st, with all preparations complete, we bid adieu to St. Charles and push off amidst the cheers of thousands of onlookers. Each year, the spring floodwaters send tons of debris down the Missouri. The Discovery Expedition soon learned that we would have to contend with this as we moved upriver.
Of all the money here I had, I spent it in good company, and all the harm I've ever done, alas, was done to none but me. It's all I've done for want of wit, to memory now I can't recall. So filled to me that parting glass and good night, and joy be with you all. Above the comrades, here I have with this sorry for my going away, and all the sweethearts here I have, they wish me one more day to stay. But since it falls up to my love that I should go, and you should not, I'll gently rise and softly call good night.
We pushed off from Bellevue on the morning of July 28th. The winds were very favorable out of the south, and we set sail on all three boats to the Park Service headquarters. At a special ceremony on the Omaha Reservation, we raised our nation's colors side by side with the Omaha flag, symbolizing friendship and unity, and honoring the fact that the Omaha are a sovereign nation.
If I had money enough to stand and
Once again, we enjoy favorable winds as all three boats sail upstream without auxiliary power.
this town as surely has my heart begun, the rosy cheeks and ruby lips. I alone she has my heart enthralled, so filled to me the parting glass and good night and joy be with you all.
Our good friends Hassan Davis and Porter Williams compare York notes. The site of the first council between Lewis and Clark and the Oto and Missouri was near present-day Fort Atkinson. After the formal ceremony commemorating that event, we invite Bat Shunatona, representative of the Oto tribe, to join us under the shade awning that the Corp of Discovery rigged from the keelboat sail. Representatives from the various tribes performed traditional dances during the event. Managing the logistics of moving the Discovery expedition across the country is a daily event. Discovery expedition members educate the children of Decatur about the firearms and accoutrements of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Before our departure, we fire the swivel blunderbuss, which is always a delight to the young folks that visit our encampment. Each year, the Sergeant Floyd Honor Guard, a Lewis and Clark living history group in the Sioux City area, commemorates the death and burial of Sergeant Floyd. During our visit, the Discovery expedition was honored to be invited to join them in a major bicentennial pageant. After the Living History event, a special private ceremony was held at the Floyd Monument, where we honored not only Floyd, but Glenn Bishop, our mentor, Peter Gary, and all our other fallen comrades. Above Sioux City, the Missouri River is not channelized. 9 years of drought had reduced the Missouri to unprecedented low levels. The two Perot's were able to continue on upriver. However, much to the disappointment of the Corps, after scouting the river above Ponca, it was deemed not feasible to take the keelboat beyond Sioux City. With the help of our bicentennial partners, the South Dakota National Guard, we pulled the keelboat and transported it by land to our next major event at Elk Point. While encamped at Elk Point, we commemorated the historic election of Patrick Gass to the rank of sergeant. Our National Guard partners and local reenactors joined us for a historic hike on the river's edge to Spirit Mound. The Perreaults made their way upriver to Yankton, and we were all reunited with the keelboat and the ground crew at our encampment below Gavin's Point Dam. A special two-day bicentennial event was held below the dam, commemorating the first meeting between the Corp of Discovery and the Yankton Sioux. The Discovery expedition was invited to participate in a pageant with the Yankton. The pageant was pre-recorded, allowing the reenactors to talk among themselves. The second day, having established friendships with tribal members, as the pre-recorded program played, our Yankton friends warned us that other Indian groups were not happy about us coming upriver and were threatening to try and stop us. It was a historic moment when 200 years later, the Yankton once again warned the Corp of Discovery of impending trouble. While encamped at Chamberlain, we were contacted by tribal representatives who requested a council, and we agreed to meet in our camp. Tribal members informed us that Lewis and Clark represented the dawn of genocide for the Indians. We were told in no uncertain terms that we were not wanted in Indian country, and we should take our boats and our funny clothes and go home. That same evening, other tribal representatives visited our camp to reassure us that most Indians did not feel that way, and they were anxious for us to visit their communities and schools. Well, our members did some very serious soul searching. We discussed our mission and concluded that what we had been doing since we left Elizabeth, Pennsylvania, was good. It was good for our country, both Indian and non-Indian communities alike. In addition, we sincerely believed that what we were doing provided a platform for discussion and an opportunity to call attention to Indian grievances that desperately needed to be discussed. We believed in our hearts that our mission could be instrumental in helping the healing process, a process that must start with honest dialogue and open hearts with open minds. We continued on upriver to the confluence of the Bad River, where the confrontation between Lewis and Clark and the Teton Sioux took place. The confluence of the Bad River is near present-day Fort Pierre. We had been honored to be invited by a group of Sioux from the Pine Ridge Reservation to join them in presenting a pageant daily for the 3 days that we were encamped at the mouth of the Bad River. It was a real treat to have an opportunity to develop some strong kinship with the Sioux folks, and especially to have the opportunity to spend time with the children, who were just absolutely adorable. And we really developed a fondness for the kids that spent a lot of their free time when they weren't performing in the arena, if not most of their free time, was spent in our encampment. At every stop along the trail, it was the kids that lifted our spirits and reassured us that what we were doing was a good thing, good for the country, good for the communities. In the evenings, we often enjoyed some good camaraderie and fun and songs around the campfire. It was always a special treat when local folks that we met along the trail would come and visit and sing and play along with the Corps. We frequently traveled to the Ten of Many Voices locations It was always an opportunity to meet friends and renew old acquaintances that we had met along the trail. On upriver, we supported the national signature event, the Circle of Cultures, at Bismarck. We encamped at Kimball Bottom, just below the site of the signature event at St. Mary's College. As we pushed on toward Fort Mandan, winter was knocking at our door. The nights were cold, the mornings brisk.
On the banks of the creek is there when I'm going to trap and be free. Time to hurry on up the old wide Missouri. So row and a row and stick up now still. I want to make rendezvous early this year and greet all my friends round the campfire's bright and dance and make whiskey in the mountain moonlight.
We arrived at Fort Mandan on a cool, clear day. Men packed their gear, moved ashore, and we formed up and marched into the fort. We raised our nation's colors and sang Chester. Our visit at the fort was somewhat bittersweet. We were all anxious to get home, but yet it was sad to leave the trail, and we all looked forward to the coming year. Over the winter of 04-05, a number of our Discovery Expedition members were very busy refurbishing and reworking the hulls of the white and the red Pierrot. A tunnel hull design was incorporated so that the motors, prop shaft, and props would require less depth of water to still maintain their efficiency and provide adequate power for the boats. It was very effective, and the Pierrots functioned much better through the course of 05 and 06. Our commitment to telling the Lewis and Clark story in living history fashion would not be complete without commemorating the keelboat return. On April 7th, 2005, the keelboat, the flag furled at half-mast, honoring the death of the Pope. A crew of men with the Arikara chief and the prairie dog on board. All was ready, and the keelboat headed downstream. The logistics of managing ground crew and boat movement, as always, were a great concern. It was good to renew old friendships in the communities along the river, and of course, the smiles on the faces of the children lifted the spirits of the men.
I'm going to trap and be free. Time to hurry on up the old wide Missouri. So row and a row and stick up now still. I want to make rendezvous early this year and greet all my friends round the campfire's bright and dance and make whiskey in the mountain moonlight. We leave St. John's behind us as we go on our way, and we row and we pole or Cordell all the day. We pass the shut-ins.
The Corps had an enjoyable stop at the Nebraska City Interpretive Center.
In the cottonwood shade, so row and a row and stick up now still. I want to make rendezvous early this year and greet all my friends round the campfire's bright and dance and make merry in the mountain moonlight. When Bonnie, all my family is here on the wide Missouri, and with them I'll trade, baby, take me a wife on the wide Missouri. It's a very good life. So row and a row and stick up now still. I want to make rendezvous early this year and greet all my friends round the campfire's bright.
The keelboat was pulled out and trailered to a special event in Jefferson City. While at the Capitol, the Discovery Expedition was privileged to enjoy a special tour including the Capitol Dome.
Sun rolls up, but we float down, way down the Ohio to Shawnee Town. And it's hard on the beach shore, she moves too slow, way down Shawnee Town on the Ohio. Now the current's got her now, boys, and we'll take up the slack. We'll float her down Shawnee Town and push, whack her back. And it's hard.
Joanne Bishop and her sidekick Meriwether joined the crew for a stretch of the Missouri. The keelboat and crew arrived safely back at St. Charles to celebrate Heritage Days. A welcome back ceremony was held at the foot of the arch with the Discovery Expedition and the St. Charles Fife and Drum. Up through the locks to the Alton Marina. The keelboat goes back on the trailer for her trip home to St. Charles. Back at the boathouse, the keelboat is backed in to her resting place in the lower level. On April 7th, 2005, the Discovery Expedition, after a wonderful, enjoyable stay at Fort Mandan, was ready to depart and continue our westward adventure. We were joined by our very dear friend Amy Mossett, who boarded the red boat in the role of Sacagawea. The keelboat headed south downstream towards St. Louis. The two pirogues were pointed upstream and continued their westward movement. At Newtown, we received a warm reception from the three affiliated tribes, the Mandan, Hidatsa, Arikara. And we were joined by Jessica Grinnell and her adorable little boy in the role of Sacagawea and Pomp. While encamped at Newtown, we were treated like royalty and felt like family. Many of our friends among the three affiliated tribes visited the camp in the evening. Dancers performed for us. Keith Bear came down and spent a whole evening in camp with us, telling stories and playing his handmade flutes, and it was a very memorable and enjoyable experience. As we readied for our departure from Newtown, we met with Tribal Chairman Tex Hall. We thanked him for the hospitality, the overwhelming hospitality and friendship that we enjoyed during our stay. And we promised Tex that in whatever capacity we could serve, that we would be there for the signature event in '06. When the Corps reached the confluence of the Yellowstone, just east of the Montana line, we were invited to participate in a special ceremony where the Espontoon was symbolically passed from Captain Clark to our good friend and supporter, General Mike Hagen of the North Dakota National Guard, who then in turn passed it to General Mosley of the Montana National Guard, who then passed it back to Captain Clark. We crossed the Montana line and pushed westward toward Culberson, Montana. Cold, windy, snow blowing in our face, As we pushed on to Fort Peck Dam, once again the Corps was faced with disappointment. Above the dam, the reservoirs were more than 60 feet below their normal water line. Further west at the UL Bend, the water levels were lower than they had been in decades. And reluctantly, once again, we were forced to abandon the river and go overland to continue our journey. Our disappointment was offset by the opportunity to see some of the beautiful and rugged country in the area of the UL Bend and beyond that otherwise we would not have experienced from the river. The local residents of Jordan, Montana and the surrounding area were wonderful hosts, and we thoroughly enjoyed our visit. We actually got to experience the old-fashioned way of roping them, dragging them, and branding them while we were encamped in the area. Above the Missouri Breaks, we entered the White Cliffs area, the most scenic, pristine stretch of the Missouri River. It remains today much as it did at the time of Lewis and Clark. The scenery was absolutely spectacular. The hiking opportunities, chance to explore the scenic area seemed endless. I think all the men would have enjoyed a month there if we could have afforded the opportunity. We explored the Eye of the Needle, overlooking the Missouri just across from our encampment. We were pleased to find out from the rangers in the area that the eye is believed to have fallen from natural causes and it was not a result of vandalism. Pushing on, we soon reach Decision Point, the confluence of the Marias and the Missouri. When we reached the Great Falls, we were privileged to be invited to join the Great Falls Honor Guard, a long-standing living history group, and participate in the reenactment of the portage around the Great Falls. thrilled to be literally walking in the footsteps and battling the cactus as Lewis and Clark had done 200 years ago. The Honor Guard guys did an incredible job setting a primitive camp at the Upper Portage site. The Honor Guard's own Captain Lewis explained the grand experiment, as it's known, Lewis's iron boat. A section of the iron boat was actually assembled and completed and floated on the river. The Discovery Expedition was privileged to be a part of the Gala 4th of July celebration in Great Falls. The men formed up along the parade route, along with the white boat pulled by our own Jolly Green from St. Charles, and the red boat. The men thoroughly enjoyed firing their long arms at will, much to the delight of the crowd. And in true Montana fashion, amongst the smoke and the gunfire, a good time was had by all. Near where the Upper Portage Trail intersects the Missouri again, Captain Clark and some of the men went in search of cottonwoods large enough to make canoes. It was decided that the tree was just a little too big to fell with their axes. Above the Great Falls, we took some time out to launch the dugout canoes and give the men an opportunity to become familiar with paddling a dugout, as opposed to the luxury of the pirogues that we enjoyed below the falls. Back in period attire, we proceeded on upstream. While encamped at Pelican Point, we had an opportunity to travel to Tower Rock and climb up to the ridgeline and enjoy spectacular views of the Gates of the Mountains area. Proceeding on upstream, we soon reached the Gates of the Mountains area. The scenery seemed to get more spectacular with each stroke of the paddle. During the course of the day, We changed crews 3 times to allow everyone an opportunity to canoe through this scenic and pristine area. Reaching the Three Forks area, the men enjoyed an opportunity to climb Lewis Rock, overlooking the Madison, the Jefferson, and the Gallatin. We were surprised one afternoon at our encampment when a tour bus pulled up and none other than Dr. Gary Moulton stepped off the bus. We were all pleased to see our good friend, and our own Charbonneau presented Gary with a hand-carved Shoshone pipe as described and illustrated in the journals. At Lewis and Clark Caverns, we were pleased to join Curly Bear and a group of Blackfeet dancers and drummers for a very special presentation. Later that evening, a number of the Blackfeet young men joined us for song and camaraderie in camp, and a hope that we would all meet again in 2006. Pushing on, we followed the Jefferson past Beaverhead Rock to Clark's Lookout outside of Dillon. DSEC was invited to provide a color guide for a special ceremony dedicating the new signage and the refurbished area at Clark's Lookout. Continuing on to the headwaters, we finally reached Camp Fortunate. There we had a special reenactment with the Shoshone, commemorating the first meeting with Lewis and Clark. Captain Lewis exchanged headgear and clothing with the Shoshone chief Kamehameha. We also commemorated what is perhaps the greatest coincidence in American history. Miraculously, the leader of the Shoshone turned out to be none other than Sacagawea's brother. The captains successfully traded for horses with the Shoshone, and the Corps proceeded on up the canyon to Lemhi Pass. We enjoyed an evening at the Canvas Cafe, Grant, Montana, with their deluxe accommodations, before proceeding on the following day around Red Butte and up the canyon toward the pass. The Lewis and Clark Trail follows along Horse Prairie Creek, working its way up the canyon through steep and narrow cuts in the rocks. This trail is on private ground, and we were very, very fortunate when the landowners agreed to give the Discovery Expedition special permission to bring our horses and our men along the creek, literally walking in the footsteps of Lewis and Clark, and up onto Lemhi Pass. As we continued our final ascent over Lemhi Pass, our own Hugh McNeil stood with a foot on each side of the little rivulet and thanked his God that he had lived to bestride the mighty and heretofore deemed endless Missouri. Lemhi Pass marked a significant milestone in our adventure. Many of the members of the Corps took advantage of the opportunity for a photo op on top of the pass. we received special permission to set our camp right on the ridgeline adjacent to Lemhi Pass. The following morning, we gathered our horses and dropped down off of Lemhi Pass along the old Indian road that follows the bench high above the Lemhi River. We dropped down and arrived in Salmon, Idaho late that afternoon. After an enjoyable stay in Salmon, we pushed on toward Lost Trail Pass, traveling a section of the old Indian trail known as the Wagon Hammer Loop. Crossing over Lost Trail Pass, dropping down into the Bitterroot Valley, we were very privileged to join direct descendants of the Flathead chiefs and members of their tribe in a special powwow and ceremony commemorating the first meeting with Lewis and Clark. The Corps gifted the chiefs with some special handmade knives, Corps medals, and peace medals for the elders. It was much appreciated, and a warm kinship was formed between the Flatheads and the Discovery Expedition. During our stay at Travelers Rest, we enjoyed lots of visitors each day and entertained the kids with our medicine show. And of course, as always, the big hit was the firing of the blunderbuss. It was here that we were joined by the Travelers Rest Lewis and Clark Brigade, a local living history group who participated in the reenactment at Travelers Rest and joined us in our ascent up over Lolo Pass. The Corps thoroughly enjoyed the hospitality and the genuine friendship that was extended to us at Travelers Rest. On top of Lolo Pass, once again we had a very special ceremony symbolically passing the Espontoon from Captain Clark to General Mosley of the Montana National Guard to Colonel Goodall of the Idaho National Guard, who returned it to Captain Clark. Lem Mitchell, a non-treaty Nimipu standing to the left, and Lewis Adams, a Salish elder, provided some inspirational words during the course of the ceremony. On September 15th, 200 years to the day, we ascended Windover Ridge up onto the old Nimipu Trail, known as the Lolo Trail. Following along the trail, oftentimes the sharp ridge drops off on either side, and there's really no other place to travel, and you know with absolute certainty that you are literally stepping in the footsteps of Lewis and Clark. On the 21st, we dropped down onto the Weippe Prairie and reenacted the first meeting between Lewis and Clark and the Nimipu, the Nez Perce. Captain Clark presented two young Nez Perce boys with ribbons, and they took him back to meet the chief, portrayed by our good friend Alan Pinkham. Captain Clark gifted the chief with a peace medal. After our visit with the good folks of Weippe, we dropped down off of the high plateau down into the Clearwater Valley and established our canoe camp. Here on the Clearwater, less than a mile below the actual site of Lewis and Clark's canoe camp, we found enough room to spread out, set our encampment, and begin work on 2 ponderosa pine logs with the same kind of tools that Lewis and Clark used 200 years prior. On the historic date, October 7th, the 2 freshly made canoes were launched in the Clearwater, along with the 3 other canoes that we had used coming up the Missouri, forming a historically accurate fleet of 5 dugouts, and we pushed off to shoot the Clearwater. Knowing what lay in store for us, we thought it appropriate to bow our heads and say a short prayer and ask for safe passage down the Clearwater. We arrived at the confluence of the Clearwater and the Snake with only one mishap. As Lewis and Clark did 200 years earlier, we swamped a canoe and all the men took a bath. But there was no injury, no serious loss of equipment, and all was well when we reached the confluence. Once again, the Espontoon was symbolically passed from Captain Clark to the Idaho commander, who in turn passed it to the Washington National Guard commander, and then back to Captain Clark. As the Snake River spilled down onto the Columbia, the weather began to change, and we would learn to know rain and wind almost constantly on a day-to-day basis. camp wasn't always quite this wet, but it seemed like most of the time it was. Rest assured, regardless of the weather, regardless of how wet and messy it became, it never dampened the spirits of the Discovery Expedition. At Clark's Park in Washougal, Washington, a special ceremony was held in our encampment. We were joined there by Sonny and Taylor Alvik, direct descendants of Chief Tumult of the Cascades. Chief Tumult had been unjustly hung by a young, impulsive, arrogant lieutenant by the name of Philip Sheridan. The Discovery Expedition expressed their regret for the injustice that had transpired back in the 1850s, and Captain Clark presented Sonny and Taylor with Jefferson Peace Medals. It was a very emotional event, and once again, members of the Corps moved from the living history arena into the arena of making history. We left Washougal reassured that our mission was significant and that we can make a difference. And we felt good inside that we had helped the healing process among the Cascades. Encamped in the rain, the educational initiative continued, and the spirits remained high and dry. At the mouth of the Kalama, we had our first meeting with the Chinook. The Chinook greeted us in their traditional canoes and symbolically raised their paddles in a salute of peace and friendship. While encamped at Naptive Cove Heritage Center, we were very fortunate to be gifted the hind quarter of an elk by some local hunters. As we neared our final destination, we rounded Point Elise and had our first view of the mouth of the Columbia. As we arrived at station camp, once again, the friendly Chinook paddled out to greet us and honored us with a paddle salute. On August 31st of 2003, the Discovery Expedition's keelboat pushed off from Elizabeth, Pennsylvania. On November 15th, 2005, our dugout canoes pulled ashore just below station camp. Ocean in view. Oh, the joy. Upon our arrival at station camp, we received a warm welcome from our Chinook friends and Ray Gardner, Vice Chair of the Chinook. Ray has since taken over the role as Chairman of the Chinook. We were quite surprised upon our arrival to find that President Jefferson was there to greet us. Apparently he was concerned about our well-being and traveled to the coast to ensure that everything was going along okay. President Jefferson, portrayed by Bill Barker, joined us in our encampment for some hot chili and conversation. Bill has become a big fan, a supporter of the Discovery Expedition, and it's always a pleasure to share his camaraderie and his wit. The Discovery Expedition, along with members from the Hog Heaven Muzzleloaders Group and the Living History reenactors from Fort Clatsop, all participated in the signature event Ocean in View near Astoria. Try as it may, day in and day out, the rain could not dampen our spirits. A month prior to our arrival at the site of Fort Clatsop, tragically, the fort had burned to the ground. When we arrived, instead of a fort, we found that the National Park Service had set up a tent and they were conducting an archaeological dig on the site. In addition, the Park Service had orchestrated a wonderful program to show the public how the Corp of Discovery would have constructed primitive shelters 200 years ago. Members of the Discovery Expedition, Hog Heaven Muzzleloaders, the Honor Guard from Great Falls, the Living History reenactors from Fort Clatsop, all participated in demonstrating to the public how Lewis and Clark would have survived when they first arrived at the site of Fort Clatsop. Over the next several days, we enjoyed the opportunity to do some hiking and see some of the local Lewis and Clark sites. The men hiked up onto Mackenzie Head, where we spent the night and enjoyed a spectacular view of the sunset over the ocean. The following day, we dropped off of Mackenzie Head and made the hike through the rainforest down onto the Long Beach Peninsula to the site where Clark carved his name on a tree. November 19, 1805, by land from the United States, Captain William Clark. Be advised that carving your name in a bronze tree is very hard on the knife. Having finally reached our destination on the Pacific, young Shannon ceremoniously dipped the Lewis and Clark flag into the waters of the Pacific. It was a time to reflect on our adventure, enjoy some camaraderie, good humor, good song around the campfires before we departed for home. On March 19th, the Discovery expedition began to regroup at Atoll Landing. We established our encampment and started preparing for our eastward movement. Over the course of the winter, Dick Brumley had received express permission from Ray Gardner and the Chinook elders to replicate a Chinook canoe. A special ceremony was scheduled for March 23rd, where Ray Gardner and our Chinook friends gathered a blessing and cleansing of the canoe that Dick had built over the winter. All present at the gathering were given cedar boughs to cleanse the canoe. Cedar boughs were then burned in the fire to dispose of any evil that had been collected. Our young Shannon gifted his good friend Ray Gardner with a blanket. Back on the Oregon side of the river, the Discovery expedition formed up to participate in the rededication ceremony of the newly constructed Fort Clatsop. When the ceremony in the fort concluded, we marched along the trail back to Atoll Landing and prepared to cast off for our eastward journey. As we left Lewis and Clark River and turned up the Columbia, we were very impressed with how easily Itzwood handled. Much, much preferred over paddling a glorified log. Itzwood proved that she could handle the waters of the Columbia in wind and waves that no dugout could have possibly sustained. As we moved up the Columbia, we marked our progress as Mount Hood became smaller and smaller in the distance. A contingent of men from the Discovery expedition traveled to the School for the Blind in Washougal. It was very moving to see the smiles on the children's face as they could feel and smell and handle things that were new and strange to them. That same afternoon, we were scheduled for a gathering at the Cathapodal Longhouse. Coincidentally, when we arrived at Cathapodal, there was a group of deaf children visiting the Longhouse, and we had an opportunity to visit with them and interact. As always, there was the children along the trail that had special meaning to us and lifted our spirits and reassured us it's a good thing we're doing. As we moved further up the Columbia and left the gorge behind us, the weather changed dramatically and rainforests gave way to semi-arid plateaus. As we began our overland movement, we were pleased to find that the outfitter had done his homework and commemorated the gifting of an eloquent white horse by Chief Wellabit of the Walla Walla to Captain Clark. The rolling hills and valleys provided the same vistas, the same horizons that Lewis and Clark had seen 200 years ago. But the windmills standing in silence gave a stark contrast to the surrounding terrain. Our overland route took us to Lewiston, Idaho, where we joined the Nez Perce for the Summer of Peace signature event. Nez Perce dancers welcomed all in attendance to their homeland. The Nez Perce veterans paraded the colors during the opening ceremony. We all enjoyed being a part of perhaps the largest circle dance ever. Certainly, it was the largest one of our bicentennial experience. Members of the Nez Perce Tribal Council meet our chief, Greg Sartorius. The lovely young Nez Perce dancers added color and charm to the event. Rebecca Miles, chairman of the Nez Perce, presented a wonderful and warm welcome. After the formalities, she took the time to come and meet our chairman, Greg Sartorius. Our good friend Chief Snyder of the Chinook joined us at the Summer of Peace. He's a dear friend and a big fan of the Discovery Expedition. Our encampment was on the grounds of Lewis and Clark College. Each day we had the opportunity to spend many hours interacting with the children that came to visit. Three extant Lewis and Clark Tippets: Roger Windlake, Steve Morehouse, and our own Captain Lewis Bryant Boswell. The Discovery Expedition was honored to be asked to join the United States Army Old Guard and participate in the closing ceremonies. Stephanie Ambrose Tubbs addresses the crowd at a special dedication ceremony held on Lolo Pass. Stephanie's mom, Maura, expresses her appreciation to all those who've gathered to honor her husband. A plaque honoring Stephen Ambrose is unveiled on Lolo Pass, and the Discovery Expedition fires an honorary salute. In the spring of '06, the Lolo Trail was still too snow-covered for the Forest Service to allow a large group to pass. Special permission was given for several of our members, our own Captain Lewis Bryant Boswell and Jesse Murphy, to travel with an outfitter over the trail representing the Discovery Expedition. At lower elevation on the old Nimipu Trail, the snow had cleared and we were allowed to recreate the Corp of Discovery's trip from Lolo Pass down to Lolo Hot Springs. Having been joined by our old friends from the Travelers Rest Lewis and Clark Brigade, we proceeded on from Lolo Hot Springs down to Travelers Rest. While encamped at Travelers Rest, we supported the 4th of July celebration in the surrounding communities of Missoula, Lolo, and at Lick Creek down the Bitterroot Valley. At Travelers Rest, the Discovery Expedition and the Travelers Rest Lewis and Clark Brigade presented a pageant depicting the departures of Lewis and Clark. It was not only a recreation, but an actual departure, as Lewis and a contingent of men headed up for the Marias, and the rest of the group began their overland trip to the Yellowstone. Captain Lewis and party hike along the Blackfoot River and up over the Continental Divide at Lewis and Clark Pass. Captain Lewis joined the Blackfeet on a bluff above the Two Medicine fight site for a healing ceremony. Tribal spokesman George Heavy Runner and Captain Lewis reflected on the journal entries pertaining to the Two Medicine tragedy. Captain Lewis presented an analogy of what warriors and soldiers face in the line of duty and expressed his sincere regret for the tragic event on the Two Medicine River. He shared his hope that the Blackfeet would continue to preserve their culture and language and promote better understanding among all Americans. Captain Lewis presented a peace medal to the tribal elders and draped a 15-star flag over the shoulder of the most revered leader, Chief Earl Oldperson. At the next day's events in Browning, a number of the elders wore their medals and thanked Captain Lewis for speaking from his heart. Once again, the Discovery Expedition had moved into the arena of making history and reaffirmed that we can and have made a difference.
She rocks to the weather and she rolls to the lake as the gently we glide.
While Captain Lewis was en route to the Marias, Captain Clark and his party traveled down the Bitterroot Valley and encamped at Indian Trees Park. Captain Clark and party picked up their horses across from the Indian trees and ascended Gibbons Pass, dropping down into the Big Hole Country.
The old wide Missouri, so roam and a roam and stick up now still. I want to make a rendezvous early this year and read all my friends.
Clark and party reached the Yellowstone and assembled their catamaran and made ready to descend the Yellowstone. The two dugouts lashed together in pontoon boat fashion proved to be a very seaworthy craft.
We leave St. John's behind us as we go on our way, and we row and we pull Orcadillo the lake. We pass the Charrettes, Luder and Gasconade, and we camp on
On the historic date, Clark and party put ashore at Pompey's Pillar. The injured Private Gibson was helped ashore to rest on the bank. Clark took a party of men and hiked up to Pompey's Pillar, where he carved his name and date in the sandstone rock.
And with them I'll trade, maybe take me a wife on the wide Missouri. It's a very good life, so roam and
The signature event at Pompey's Pillar was spectacular. The Crow Indians were the host tribe for the event. During the opening ceremonies, the Crow paraded in all their regalia and beautiful horse trappings. The Discovery expedition was greatly honored when the Crow invited us to join the Veteran Honor Guard to present the colors at the opening of the Bicentennial signature event. Brother John joined Captain Clark for a special ceremony and unveiling of the bust of William Clark, replicated from the bust at his memorial in Bellefontaine Cemetery. After the signature event, it was on down the Yellowstone. We could smell the home fires burning, but we took time out to participate in community events along the way. Meanwhile, back up on the Missouri, Captain Lewis instructs the men in the manly art of elk hunting. Later that day, in pursuit of the elusive elk, the one-eyed Cruzat sees what he believes to be an elk in the bushes and takes aim and fires. But wait, oh no! It's Captain Lewis. Oh my word. Cruzat has done it. He has shot Lewis in the butt. The Corps was reunited on the historic date at the confluence of the Yellowstone. From the confluence, we proceeded on to Newtown for the special signature event hosted by the 3 affiliated tribes. Once again, our dear friend Jessica Grinnell joined us in the role of Sacagawea. We were honored by the 3 affiliated tribes when they asked us to join in the Grand March and present the colors during the opening ceremonies. Honoring the bond of friendship that was made in 2005, Tex Hall and the 3 affiliated tribes had invited the Discovery expedition to be an integral part of the signature event in Newtown. Chairman Tex Hall looks on as Amy Mossett joins him and Keith Bear plays the flute. Keith Bear as Sheheke and Amy Mossett as Yellowcorn board the pirogue and prepare to proceed on to St. Louis.
We leave St. John's behind us as we go on our way.
En route to Whetstone Bay, we stopped at the Dueling Ranch for a buffalo hunt. The ranch is all open pasture, and the buffalo are very wild.
So roam and they roam.
we had a wonderful opportunity to get a flavor of what it must have been like for the hunters on the Lewis and Clark expedition to pursue buffalo. We were successful in our efforts, and a young bull was quickly and humanely taken with 2 shots from flintlock rifles. Every part of the young bull was utilized, including the hide and the entrails that were taken back to camp to prepare boudin blanc.
So roll, Monday, roll, and stick up now, steer. I want to make rendezvous early this year and greet all my friends round the campfire's bright and dance and make merry in the mountain moonlight.
Proceeding on down the Missouri, we pulled ashore at Floyd's Memorial, ascended the hill, and had a special ceremony honoring not only Sergeant Floyd, but all of our fallen comrades from the Discovery Expedition.
I've traveled all over this world, and now to another I go. I know that good quarters are waiting to welcome more rosin to boat. To welcome more rosin to boat. To welcome more rosin to boat. I know that good quarters are waiting to welcome more rosin to boat. When the head is laid out on the counter of my ship here from below, saying send down a hogshead of whiskey to drink with the rosin to boat. To drink with the rosin to boat. To drink with the rosin to boat. Saying send down a hogshead of whiskey to drink with the rosin to boat. Then get a half dozen stout fellows and line them all up in a row. Let 'em drink out of half-gallon bottles to the memory of rosin to boat. To the memory of rosin to boat. To the memory of rosin to boat. Let 'em drink out of half-gallon bottles to the memory of rosin to boat.
As we neared the landing in St. Louis, Captain Clark found it necessary to chastise York. York found it necessary to react appropriately.
Take the same half dozen fellows and line them all up there. All the way, they come, sir, with catfish bones, and we're bound away for Louisiana. So heave her up, my golden, golden boys. All the way, heave her up, and don't you make a noise, 'cause we're bound away for Louisiana. The Kentucky cats don't have no tails.
Rosemary Mandan and her husband joined us on the pirogue in the role of Shehake and Yellowcorn.
Bound away for Louisiana. So heave her up, my golden, golden boys.
And everybody was in there, all the employees, the shipmates, you know.
tuck, ladies don't have no frills.
All the way,
They're plain and skinny as a catfish gill.
down the way for Louisiana. So heaver up, my bullet, bullet boys. All the way, heaver up, and don't you make a noise. I've traveled all over this world, and now to another I go. I know that good quarters are waiting to welcome more rosin and hoe. To welcome more rosin to bow. To welcome more rosin and hoe. I know that good quarters are waiting to welcome more rosin and hoe. When the head is laid out on the counter of my ship here from below, saying send down a hogshead of whiskey to drink with more rosin to bow.
The latest red-haired chief, young William Clark, the great, 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 great grandson of Captain William Clark and grandson of D-Sex Captain Clark. Although the official bicentennial events were over, we in the Discovery Expedition felt the need to return to Monticello where it all began, just as Lewis and Clark had done 200 years before.
But we float down, way down the Ohio to Shawnee Town.
Below Clark's cabin at the Falls of the Ohio,
She moves too slow, way down Shawnee Town on the Ohio. Now the current's got her now, boys, and we'll take up the slack. We'll float her down Shawnee Town and bushwhack her back. And it's hard on the beach shore. She moves too slow, way down Shawnee Town on the Ohio. There's whiskey in the dig, boys, and weed in the sack. We'll trade 'em in at Shawnee Town and bring the rock salt back. And it's hard on the beach shore. She moves too slow, way down Shawnee Town on the Ohio. The water's mighty warm, boys, and the air is cool and dank. The dango fog's got so thick we can hardly see the bank. And it's hard on the beach shore. She moves too slow, way down Shawnee Town on the Ohio.
a welcome home by the family at Locust Grove.
Another in New Orleans, going down Shawnee Town to see my Indian queen. And it's hard on the beach shore. She moves too slow, way down Shawnee Town on the Ohio. Now sun rolls up, but we float down, way down the Ohio to Shawnee Town. And it's hard on
Of all the money here I had, I spent it in good company, and all the harm that it was done, alas, was done to none but me. It's all I've done for want of wit, to memory now I can't recall. So beautiful.
We join our Shawnee brothers and sisters for a hike along the old Indian Trail over Cumberland Gap.
The bold comrades here I have with their sorry for my going away, and all the sweethearts here I have, they wish me one more day to stay. But since it falls up to my
a stop at VMI. As always, the rain could not dampen the spirits of the Discovery Expedition. The men gather for a photo op with the captain, including our long deceased brother, Sergeant Floyd. We gather on the lawn at Monticello. Five of our members on the same rooftop we stood on the day we kicked off the Bicentennial. One last campfire. Traditional mint juleps. The kitchen tent comes down for the last time. One more time, packing the core trailer. For 4 years, we had traveled across our country and back. We had walked in the footsteps of Lewis and Clark through beautiful and pristine areas that remain today much as they did 200 years ago. We had ascended and descended the mighty rivers and majestic mountains that stretch across our country. We learned the true meaning of teamwork, camaraderie, and honor, honoring our nation, honoring Lewis and Clark, and honoring the commitments and promises the Discovery Expedition made to countless communities from sea to shining sea. We received a priceless reward for our efforts on the smiling faces of thousands of children across the country. We came to better understand our American Indian brothers and sisters, and most importantly, share in the beautiful spirituality of the Indian way. We came to better understand ourselves and the legacy we created, a legacy of communities both Indian and non-Indian, coming together to better know and understand one another. We had expressed our hope the day we left Camp River du Bois that our legacy would be one of our nation moving closer together as we continue to commemorate the Lewis and Clark expedition. And it has. We are a closer-knit American family today, and we in the Discovery Expedition all stand tall and proud to have been a part of that legacy. God bless the men and women of DSEC, and may God bless our American family.